And I think the main thing really from a testing perspective that the lessons that we can learn, first of all, is from a people perspective, right? I think the main challenge really is to have the right resources in the team, right people in the team who understand, who can work with these regulators, work with internal business, and can actually help to test these changes as far as possible before it kind of even goes to a point where it can be submitted back to the regulators. So comprehending, because these regulation requirements are not very black and white, and it's shades of gray where it has to be interpreted in a certain way, interpreted to your own organizational landscape. So that's first. The second is your test automation strategy. Now, some of the historical strategies around develop first, test later doesn't really work well in a regulatory space. So, because you don't really have the time and there is fixed deadlines and there are multiple releases for these, and you don't really want to go back and extend your timeline, have weeks and months of regression being happened. So one of the things that we have looked at in our organization is to transition from more UI-based automation to behavior-driven development, and partner with our development teams, build frameworks, testing frameworks, be it on Lattice Python or be it on JBehave for Java, SpecFlow for Microsoft, and actually upskilled our testing resources who have been excellent manual resources, functional resources, who've been doing technical testing, but not necessarily doing a lot of UI automation. And there used to be a separate teams. Now we have started to sort of mix that apart a bit, and actually upskilled our automation resources to know more about the business side and start learning more about our BDD structures and vice versa for our functional testers. The developers are playing a big part as well in that. So that's the second point. And then the third point is working with our business stakeholders to making sure our acceptance criteria on what actually needs to be tested is very strong and well defined, so that we reduce multiple iterations of testing. So the testing and the testing evidence around the algorithms is definitely an area that regulators are getting more and more interested in. I think historically I've found that in a lot of testing still used to happen, but a lot informally, not very structured way, and essentially not necessarily covering all the scenarios. So even if you have a few defect leakage, it was all within the internal structure. And as long as you're not really losing out on millions because of that, no one really paid much attention to it. But the dynamics is changing. It's not so much about the financial loss for a particular position, but essentially at a bigger scheme, at a higher view from a regulator's perspective. It's like, what if we have these scenarios? How is your algorithms going to work? And also they want to make the algorithm side more in line with probably more traditional software development, where you have structured requirements, you have architecture diagrams, you have more analysis around what actually goes into those algorithms, how are those algorithms getting developed. I think making it from a black box to a white box, I guess that's the essence of it. And that's where testing comes in as well, that we provide more evidence around how the various scenarios are getting tested for that algorithm, and then working with our quants group as well, for example, to make sure that any development that's being done between technology and the quants group are cohesive, and we provide evidence to the regulators. The shift left essentially for me is more cultural. I think we have a multitude of problems around shift left, and I think Agile and DevOps essentially is pushing those challenges a bit more, especially coming from a testing background. There is a general mindset around what is the role of testing in a shift left organization, right? Can we actually do testing without testers? And that is making testers feel very protective of the work they do as well. But that aside, I think from a delivery perspective, definitely it helps, right? Because you get feedback earlier, you can run your smoke test, your regression test at the point of your build, your continuous integration, continuous development, and continuous testing actually is happening. It is not an analysis and a development and a testing in a 2-week cycle. So you don't really do mini waterfalls. You're actually trying to do agile and DevOps. But there are essentially bigger issues around how do we staff and people the agile world of the organization without necessarily making all the testers redundant and getting new set of software development engineers in tests. And I think it's a fine balance that I guess leadership within testing and QA world are actually working on, and me included.